This is the AgXcel GX2 electric dual pump system, and it's named GX2 because it has two electric 5.3 gallon per minute pumps. It utilizes 4-inch gauge, 80 mesh filter. We have a flow meter in line, and we have also an electronic PWM. This is generally used for lower volume type applications like in-furrow, starter, anywhere from, depending on the size of the toolbar, but anywhere from 2 to 10 gallons an acre. And the way we account for the rates on these types of systems would be based off of the total gallons per minute that these two electric pumps can achieve. Now, the electric pumps are rated at 5.3 gallons per minute, and so together that's 10.6 gallons per minute, but that's not the overall capability of those two electric pumps, because you need to take into account that you need to draw from the tank, all the orificing, the plumbing, the filtering. You're going to get pressure drop, so there's a lot of variables that will take away from that total 10.6 gallons per minute. And we equate that to about 40% loss, and so the max that you're going to achieve from these two 5.3 gallon per minute pumps would be approximately 6 gallons per minute. And so when you call in to get an in-furrow type system, then we do the math, of course, to make sure that you're going to achieve that. And one thing to keep in mind when you're working with electric pumps or dual electric pumps in this type of scenario is that if you have, let's say, tanks on your tractor, well, you're going to definitely lose a lot more volume or overall capability of gallons per minute that these pumps can achieve, because you're going to lose approximately 0.5 gallons per minute for every 5 feet of hose that you have to draw from the tank. So in a scenario where you have tanks on a tractor, you're not going to be able to achieve that much. You will not achieve 6 gallons per minute. The way this is designed is that you're going to draw from your tank, so your inlet is going to come through this setup. You have an 80 mesh filter, and at times we change that to 50 mesh depending on the type of fertilizer that you're using. But there's an 80 mesh filter, comes in, it splits and goes into both pumps, and then from those both pumps it comes out through the back, comes through across, and on the cross you have an option of utilizing a pressure transducer to see pressure in your cab. Comes across and you can do bypass. We can connect this back and go back to the tank and agitate. Or if you're trying to achieve a lower volume, we can open up this valve, and I'll explain that here shortly. And then the other exit path would be through the flow meter, and we have two different types of flow meters. This, of course, is a turbine flow meter, and then we also have magnetic flow meters depending on the rates and the type of product that you're trying to apply. And then it'll go out, and then we're also able to apply section valves. So if you're doing any kind of boom sections or swath control, this system can definitely achieve that. Now when it comes to integration utilizing the GX2 dual pump system, we can integrate, of course, to many of the OEM controllers, Green Star, Trimble, Agnator, Raven, and this one, of course, shows a microtrack there. So if you're trying to do variable rate application for in-furrow, this system will definitely do that. Some of the features of the system, of course, as I mentioned, the dual pump, there will be times when you'll have to disconnect one of the pumps from the back if you're trying to achieve a lower rate. And the reason for that is once you get down below 2 gallons a minute, these pumps will struggle to try to get that low rate. And so you're going to have to disconnect one of these pumps to achieve that. And it doesn't affect anything else, the plumbing or anything. You just disconnect it and it'll allow you to get a lower rate on there. We utilize a 4-inch gauge, and the 4-inch gauge helps you see a little clearer the pressure that you're running. And one of the most critical aspects of a GX2 or an electric system is that you have to keep the pressure within a specified range in order to keep the durability of the electronics that are on the system, keep them cool, keep them running efficiently, and your system will run a lot more, not only efficient, but you get a lot more life out of it. So if you notice on all our systems, we send them out with a sticker or a decal that's on the gauge, and it runs from 10 psi to 20 psi. And that's the range that we highly recommend that you run this system. So, and the way to maintain that is, of course, in the way that you orifice the system. So running your system between 10 and 20 psi not only gives you an accurate, steady flow on your applicator, but it allows all the the electronics to run cool. If you run it at 30 psi, let's say once in a while to jump up and come back down, maybe you're doing a little bit of variable rate, not a problem. But if you're running, 500, 600 acres plus, and you're running at 30 psi, it'll definitely do it. But you're going to heat up all these components, and they'll wear a lot quicker, especially the pumps. When you run between that range, we get an average of about 4 years of life out of these pumps, and they're very durable, especially when you don't stress them. So if you're ever running the system, and let's say your pressure's up, I'll give you an example here. If I raise up my rate, you can see my pressure going up. It'll definitely do that rate, not a problem. But then again, a good example would be, let's say you have a car, you're running in second gear, and you're running 80 miles an hour. It'll do it, but it'll only do it so long to start heating up components, and it'll start to break down. And that's the same that you'll get with an electric system. I'm running 40 psi, it'll run that, but sooner or later your components, your pumps, the PWM, the harnesses will start to heat up, and they'll start to wear out, and soon it's going to give out. And so once it gives out, then you're having to replace it. And all you really have to do is change your orifice, and if you change your orifice, you'll definitely bring your pressure down. So that's why it's important. When you call in for a system, we'll set it up, we'll basically do the math, and we'll send you 3 sets of orifices that match the range that you're trying to achieve so that you can stay within that rate. Some other features of this system, if you open up the bypass here, it's basically designed to bypass the liquid. This system here, if you're trying to get a lower rate, you open this all the way out. Once you open it up all the way out, you'll see the air. There's air in here that's trapped, so you want to get the air out of the system. Once you've been able to get the air out of the system, then you'll dial it down. You can turn this knob all the way out. It's not going to leak. Turn it back in, and you start to gently close it down until it allows the pumps to stabilize on that lower rate. Once it stabilizes on that lower rate, then we take the locking collar and lock it down. I would say 97% of the time you'll probably never touch this dial. The only time you'll ever touch it again is if you're going to maybe send some back to the tank to agitate, or to run a lower rate. You'll unplug one pump, and if you have to go lower because the pump is surging a little, then you'll definitely just crack this open, as I mentioned, all the way out, and then start to back it back down. So you'll rarely use it, but it's there in case it's needed. And just a thought that if you're ever going to use this for agitation, keep in mind that if you're using, we're going to get 6 gallons a minute from the electric pumps. So if you're already utilizing 5 gallons a minute, you're probably not going to be able to use agitation, because it's going to take more than 1 gallon a minute to be able to get agitation back to your tank. So keep that in mind when you're doing that. A lot of times when you do agitation, we can always add a secondary pump. We have a kit that lets you do agitation on its own, and that might be one thing you want to consider. The way this was designed, of course, is the PWM is designed to face the tractor. A lot of times in the different types of setups that we have, it may not occur that way, but we can adjust this to move it. But the reason we want this to face the cab is because there's some LEDs on there that help show how it's performing, any troubleshooting issues. A lot of times we'll ask for the LED sequences and what they're doing. When the red light's flashing, in a flashing state, that means it's ready to go. We have power. And then when you turn it on, it goes on solid, showing that I have power, I have a PWM signal, and I'm running. When it comes to the flow meter itself has a tag on it, and the tag is used to configure your controller. So when you install the system, whether you're using a Green Star, a Trimble, AgLeader, whichever controller you're using, you're going to use the tag number on here to be able to put in the calibration for the flow meter. And there's a few numbers on here. You notice one of them says it's a liquid cal number, and one of them says it's pulses per gallon, and the other says pulses per 10 gallons. Typically, the pulses per 10 gallon is utilized by Raven. So if you have a Raven controller, you're going to use pulses per 10 gallon. Green Star, Trimble, AgLeader, you'll use the pulses per gallon. And then a controller like Microtrax, you're going to use the liquid cal number, which is like in this case a 466. And the other controllers, as I mentioned, Green Star, AgLeader, Trimble, we typically take that number divided by 2, or it's just the pulses per gallon number. So when you're setting up your controller, that's the tag number. that's the number you're looking at. And it's a little bit different on the magnetic flow meters. The magnetic flow meters, we have a completely different chart for that as well.